defense attorney, Sara Azari, Florida prosecutor, Dave Arenberg. Now, one of the upsides, and there aren't many, to having me as the anchor of a show is that I have a lot of friends. My superpower is drawing better people to me to help me do my job for you. One of them is Sara Azari. Sara says, I see you're covering this case. You know, you got to look down these roads also, because it's not as simple as they just dropped the charges because they didn't have a body. Sara, what are the missing pieces of understanding that you educated me about that bother you in terms of who did this? Specifically, the DNA and its treatment and what it could mean, and the behavior on the prosecution side.
Yeah, Chris, so with the DNA, you know, we're dealing with DNA in a marital home. It's a wash, you know, of course there's DNA. There was DNA on a syringe in the dryer, but that DNA was hers, not his. There's phone and car data that might tell part of the story, but not the entire story. And then we have this motive that somehow they're married, or she betrayed him, she was cheating on him. I mean, betrayal is not homicidal necessarily, and you don't need motive to prove murder. And more importantly, we don't have a cause of death. So when we're talking about the prosecution's case here, they've sort of alluded to three theories, which is strangulation, being shot by a regular firearm, or being killed by a dart. And so tranquilizer dart. Strangulation requires the neck. Is it decomposed, or can we examine the neck now that we have the body? What does that show? The scratches on his hands don't tell the full story. Again, with the weapons, he was an avid hunter. He was moving around, which was reflected on his phone activity, but he was shooting chipmunks, which is consistent with his hobby. You know, the dart thing, we just don't have enough evidence.
So, and Sara saved a couple for me to come to you with, Dave, as someone looking at the prosecution side of this. If they found any suggestion of DNA of another man in her vehicle or in any way oriented, and that man, that DNA had been connected to other cases, and they didn't turn it over, right. I mean, that is very damning for the prosecution, no?
Yeah, and I agree with Sara that the problems with the case involve some sanctions against the prosecution for not turning over all the evidence. The fact that there was DNA of some other individual, not her lover and not her husband, but some third party who apparently had prior, not a clear match, but it's evidence that it could have been someone else. And it could have been an innocent explanation why that DNA was found in her car, but it doesn't help the prosecution. And when the prosecution dropped the case, they had said something to the effect of there could be a body coming, like they were close to getting the body. And I think that's a big reason why they dropped it, because with the problems with the case, if they could find a cause of death, if they could get perhaps her husband's DNA under her fingernails or his blood on her, showing defensive wounds, there could be a better case for the prosecution, and they've got the body, and I think the body is going to tell a lot for the prosecutors, and that will determine whether they refile the charges against him.
Yeah, but if you had such a strong case, which, you know, you could argue they do, why didn't you turn over the exculpatory evidence, Arenberg?
You know, I don't know why the prosecution failed to turn it all over. I believe in my profession that perhaps it was something inadvertent, but I can't explain why. I know this, Chris, and this is something that Sara alluded to. His chipmunk defense sounds bogus. There's no evidence that he was shooting chipmunks at the time he was chasing her, apparently, around the house.
No question.
Right, and so they have cell phone data that shows he was chasing her around. And then why was he in airplane mode right after this all happened?
Listen.
Right? It's like Brian Koberger.
Again, listen, I give it all to you. However, Sara Azari, when you've got a strong case, the last thing you want to do is screw it up by either not performing the right procedures with what experts you want to bring in, or have potentially exculpatory DNA evidence, which maybe you can explain away. Maybe it's not a complete match. But if you don't turn it over and you know about it, aren't you asking to have your case thrown out?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, what they didn't turn over was not only exculpatory and material, but it was, the 12 out of 14 experts were excluded as a sanction. I mean, as we see with all these cases that we unpack, it's all about DNA and cell phone and car data. And so those experts were excluded. It's like, what's there left of the case? Their entire case went away because of this. And to Dave's point, this was a pattern of recklessness, the judge said. So it wasn't just, this one-time isolated failure to turn over discovery timely. I believe they didn't have everything they needed, and they screwed it up.
Now, let me just say this. For you at home, I can feel it. I can feel it coming through my phone. Oh, he did it. Technicality. Hey, everything that we're dealing with on the presidential level right now is about fugazi legal processes and people perverting the system for their own means. We have to make sure people do the job the right way, okay?
Yes.
And maybe this guy did do it. But if they were playing with the case and playing with the way to do it right, you have to punish it, even if it means he goes free. Because that's the only way you ensure the sanctity of the system. And we're seeing what happens when you don't on the top level. I got to jump. Sara Azari, thank you very much for cluing me in. Dave Arenberg, I appreciate you giving the context as always. Both of you have a great weekend, and thank you. All right? Now.